Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. Today marks 100 days since the brutal Hamas attacks on Israel. Here in the United States, divisions over the war that Israel launched that day are only growing. Joining me now, Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator, thanks again for joining. We have a lot to get to, but first let's start with this dramatic new escalation in the Middle East. President Biden strikes against the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. Top House progressive Congresswoman Jayapal said the president should have gotten, and in fact needed, permission from Congress, calling the strikes an unacceptable violation of the Constitution. Do you agree with her? Were these strikes illegal?
Well, what I do think is the president has a right to respond on an emergency basis to the disruption of international shipping brought about by the Houthis. On the other hand, he has got to get to Congress immediately. It is Congress that has the right to declare war, not the President of the United States. So I hope this issue gets to Congress immediately.
Let's talk about the war that Israel is waging in Gaza. You are trying to force a vote in Congress that would direct the U.S. State Department to look into whether Israel is using U.S. equipment or assistance to violate human rights standards in Gaza. The spokesman for the National Security Council, John Kirby, responded to your plan saying, quote, "We do not believe that this resolution is the right vehicle to address these issues, and we don't think now is the right time. The Israelis have indicated they are preparing to transition their operations to a much lower intensity, and we believe that that transition will be helpful both in terms of reducing civilian casualties as well as increasing humanitarian assistance," unquote. What do you say to that?
I strongly disagree. Jake, we have got to, as Americans, take a very deep breath. What is going on in Gaza right now is a horrendous humanitarian catastrophe. We're looking at 23,000 people who have been killed, almost 60,000 have been wounded, and 2/3 of the people who have been killed are women and children. You're looking at 70% of the housing units in Gaza that have been destroyed. Jake, if I use the word Dresden, Germany to you, you think about the horrific destruction during World War II of that city. What is going on in Gaza now in 3 months is worse than what took place in Dresden over a 2-year period. This is a catastrophe. And now, according to the United Nations, after you have 1.9 million people displaced from their homes, they don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have medical equipment, they don't have fuel, what you are looking at is imminent starvation. Children are starving to death. So my view has been from the beginning, Israel has a right to respond to this horrific terrorist attack from Hamas. But you do not have a right to go to war against an entire people, women and children. And the United States Congress has got to act because a lot of this destruction is being done with military weapons supplied by the United States of America. And what the resolution that I'm introducing is about, it's consistent with the Foreign Assistance Act. It says that if American military assistance is given to any country, Saudi Arabia, Israel, any other country, it has got to be used consistent with human rights, international human rights standards, and American law. In my opinion, that is certainly not the case. We have a horrific humanitarian catastrophe. We cannot turn our backs on it. Congress has got to start moving to protect children in Palestine.
Do you think that you can get 51 votes?
Not on Tuesday night, I don't. I think we're making progress. I think what we're trying to do is unprecedented. This is the first time this particular resolution has ever been brought to the floor for a vote. This is the first time we have ever seen, members of the Congress beginning to stand up to Israeli aid. So it's going to be a long, hard process, but we got to begin somewhere. This is the beginning.
So you have been critical about what you call Netanyahu's illegal, immoral, brutal, and grossly disproportionate war, unquote. 100 days ago, of course, right. On October 7th, Hamas sent hundreds of fighters into Israel. They took hostages, they killed children, they killed families, grandparents.
Yes,
what should have been done? How can the Israelis go after Hamas if they are hiding among the Palestinian civilians?
Well, Jake, that is a very fair question. As I've said a million times, what Hamas is a disgusting terrorist organization. What they did is unspeakable. And they still are holding over 100 hostages. The situation is difficult. It's a highly densely populated urban area. Fighting there is very difficult. No question about it. This is not an easy task to go after Hamas. But you don't starve hundreds of thousands of children in the process. Israel is a very sophisticated military, one of the most sophisticated in the world. It is not easy, but you don't destroy an entire people in the process. I think most people would say that is morally unacceptable.
So what do you think they should be doing right now, the Israelis?
Well, I think for a start, there has got to be an immediate humanitarian pause. Food, water is not getting into Gaza. And children are going hungry and people are facing starvation. So the first thing that's got to happen is there have to be a massive increase in humanitarian aid to fend off the famine. And second of all, Israel has got to target its attacks. You cannot continue this vast war of indiscriminate bombing and now starvation against the women and children and innocent people of Gaza.
President Biden has caught a lot of criticism from the left on his support for Israel amid this war. You're a leader on the progressive left, the movement that you helped create in your presidential campaigns. Do you think that young progressives in the United States will ultimately rally behind Joe Biden in November, or has he seriously damaged his standing?
Look, I think we will see what happens in November because the choice is pretty clear. Running against Donald Trump, who I suspect will be the Republican candidate, is one of the most dangerous political figures in modern American history. So I think people will end up rallying around Biden. But there is no question it is very hard for young people, I think for most Americans, to be excited about what is going on right now. The president has got to change course. He has been very clear. He has expressed his concern about, quote unquote, indiscriminate bombing. He has asked Netanyahu over and over again to change course. Netanyahu just yesterday said, no, we're going to continue doing what we are doing. Unacceptable. You cannot give billions of dollars to a country that ignores your wishes, violates international law. So I would hope that the president follows through on his concerns and says to Netanyahu, this is unacceptable. You're not getting a nickel more from the United States unless you radically change course. We're not going to see hundreds and hundreds of thousands of children starve to death.
Senator Bernie Sanders, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jacob.